The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome into the Coach Bill Clark Show. Pat Smith along with Coach Bill Clark, Molly Robinson. Our partner, Landry Roberts, will be back with us next week, Coach. But this show is brought to you by Dr. Pepper and our good friends at Buffalo Rock, as Jimmy Lee and those folks do not only so much for the community, but do so much for college football.
Yeah, I think you got both. You got Dr. Pepper, obviously we know all their involvement, and we see their great commercials throughout the season. And then you got Buffalo Rock, who, they serve Dr. Pepper, but Buffalo Rock is so important to our community, and obviously Jimmy Lee and the Lee family owning that company for so many years, but we appreciate them and what they do for us and for college football.
Okay, so last week on the show, we spent a good bit of time talking about Coach Clark's career, whether it was him getting started at Prattville High School, making his way to South Alabama, going over to Jacksonville State, and getting the call and coming a leap of faith to come to Birmingham and be the head coach of the UAB Blazers. Successful seasons there in Conference USA. And then all of a sudden, Coach, we kind of left last episode that it was being talked about that the program was potentially looking at being shut down. And take us back to like right before that infamous meeting with the players in the old dental center there on campus. Just take us back to when you started hearing the word officially that this might go down.
Yeah, and we talked about it in the last episode where, get there. And maybe probably I think just what all went into that. I'm not going to read because we're kind of past that now. But if we look back from last week's episode, if you missed that, at Jack State we had a really successful year. We decided to go to UAB. How bad it was. The 5 wins in 3 years really doesn't touch on how bad the facilities were, the apathy. I always tell the story. I go down the street. I can't find any students with UAB gear on. I'm like, do they not wear UAB? No, they got every other school. So there was this apathy throughout. Now, that didn't mean we didn't win in other sports, and there had not been some good teams in UAB's history. But at that point in time, the facilities, everything was horrible. So we get through this year. Prior to the year, there had been some talk, but I had not heard anything about a shutdown, or I would have never taken the job. Now we're in the season. Some things are kind of funky as we're doing, and we're having this year where we're fighting to get bowl eligible, which had only happened one time in the history of the school. I'm brought in about maybe 2 weeks before the season's over, saying this is a chance. Of course, I let the cat out of the bag. I tell the players this is this is something. They go to city council. People are starting to hear this. We get bowl eligible against Southern Miss in that last game. Now it's where we are. We kind of ended with that last week. Now there's a called team meeting from the president's office.
So that's Ray Watts.
That's Ray Watts. There's a called meeting with the players. We all know that this could happen, might happen.
But you didn't know for sure.
Didn't know for sure.
Walking into that room, the players and yourself did not know that it was a given that this program was going to be shut down at that time.
And I'll say it again. I had been told that there was this chance. I thought, hey, we get bowl eligible. We've got this turnout. That's not going to happen. Now we fast forward. We get called. We're going to this meeting, and I'm worried. There's no doubt, but I still am holding out hope. And then we've got this meeting going on.
All right. So Ray Watts, and he comes in there with another person, I guess, from the university.
Yeah, he's got security, and if you go back and watch that video, I think we're going to show some highlights of this video. I've not seen that video in years and years and years, but I think YouTube was kind of getting going. I don't know the history of YouTube, but it wasn't like something that we just like today where you've got all these apps.
Right.
So we're called, and go back and look at that facility. That's the room I always talk about our first meeting in, where we could look through the ceiling tiles and see the stars, not purposefully. So go back and look at that facility, how bad it was. We talked about we had built this. Me and you had a recruiting meeting, and when I first built that locker room, which was the old tractor shed.
It was tremendous what you guys did with that space.
We did take the space and do some, but this was our team meeting room which was bad, where Ray Watts calls the team together, and it's just outrage. And really a lot of the outrage for some guys that are graduates, Ty Long and Tristan Henderson and more guys, because of what had happened to build this team up. Ray Watts informs the team the program's going to be shut down, and I think there's some talk in there about, the guys that are there are going, their scholarships are going to be honored. And these guys can't play football.
On that track, 5 a.m., blood, sweat, and tears for this place, man. Gosh, you don't understand. You're making the worst decision of your life. And I don't know how you're going to sleep with this, bro, because you got 105 kids in here with families who bank on these scholarship. Coaches,
hey, look at these coaches in their eyes. Look at
these
all
are
of them
men
in
who
their
are
eyes.
crying right now. These are
You brought
men.
them from their families. I witnessed my coach sleep in his office for 3 months, and I see his family for 6.
Because
You
we
brought
fight
all
for
of them
this
up
place.
here knowing you were going to do this. Bring all of them up here.
That is absolutely not true.
When this meeting ends, he's told him it's going to shut down. He gets very emotional. I'm in the back of the room. I step because I'm worried something's going to happen. As this meeting ends, we're all walking out. Now, the meeting has been ended by Ray Watts. He's got security from the campus police up front to tell these players there's no longer going to be a program. And as we come out the door, the parking lot's full. So Ray Watts goes out through this parking lot, and my staff, players, and it's, there's not any dry eyes. It's bad.
Very emotional.
Yeah, it's very emotional. This becomes a national story. There's YouTube videos of players.
Every local TV station's
Yes.
in attendance.
Everybody's there. There's this becomes a national story. We leave. People are out there. Just the whole community's come out. I think I don't know who all's out there. As I go into my office, I've told this story so many times. My phone rings, and it's a coach in our conference who says, "Man, that's horrible. Are your players available?" I said, that's just like you just had a relative die and somebody calls you and said, "Hey, is the furniture for sale?" I said, "Are you kidding me?" And of course now quickly thereafter, I've got to change and think, okay, what am I going to do to help these guys get recruited? So now I got to go back to being a high school coach. I've just been told we don't have a team. My coaches are all out of jobs, whenever their contract ended, and we had the January to January contracts for staff-wise. I was still on contract, but all my coaches are about to be out of jobs. All these players who came to play football are now, that's over, and we got to go try and help them get recruited.
Okay, so you go back to your office. You say you got that message from another head coach in Conference USA. So my question is, from a communication standpoint, from whoever at the university, the point person, Watts's office, whatever the case may be, what was the logistics from that point forward in regards to, okay, we're locking the building up, there's no more offices, we're going to honor their scholarships, but if you can find them somewhere else to go and play, have at it. But I'm just curious about that communication. Once they left, when did you hear again from someone from the university?
Well, Brian Mackin, the AD,
Right.
at the time chooses to resign instead of dealing, of having to be forced to be the guy to come in there and tell us, and there's no doubt there was knowledge there beforehand. But, I give Brian credit with all the bad there that he chose to just, give up your job with no money. You're done out of there instead of being part of this mess. Now, the timeline of what happens, I know the guys, their scholarships were going to be honored if they chose to just be a regular student. They were going to honor their scholarships. And we had some guys that were injured that had to rehab, stay. They were getting local rehab. They'd been injured through the year, and they stayed. But most of those guys are going to end up leaving, going to get other scholarships, other opportunities across the country, because immediately the next day coaches start showing up on campus to recruit these guys.
So basically, it's like it is today in the transfer portal.
That's exactly what it is. It's a free for all. Coaches everywhere. The next day I've got to now go. Okay, I don't have a program. Let me tell you about these guys and start selling these players to these other coaches.
Not to mention the fact that you've got friends and coaches who have just lost their job that they need to be placed.
Well, that's the worst.
Because they've got families.
At least my players had a scholarship. As horrible as it was, these guys are out of a job when they've come into a bad situation under my behest. Hey, come here. I've got a 3-year contract, which we talked about the 3 instead of the 5. You're good. You just do your job. You do your job. Oh, by the way, we've got Bo eligible for the second time in the history of the school, and now you're out of a freaking job. So, all them years ago, I still get upset about it. It still makes me furious.
Well, it's understandable. So let's say the next 30 days, once the program gets shut down, you've already told our audience, obviously, what you were doing during that time frame for your other coaches, for obviously the players, your future at that point in time. Now, you were under contract with UAB.
Yep.
Obviously, you had it in your contract, not asking to get deep
Yeah.
into your language, but obviously if an opportunity came up, you would be allowed to pursue that, correct?
100%. And then, of course, then you go the offset. Whatever I would make, they would not have to pay. So I'm
Right.
sure there was a lot of hope I'm going to take a job. I got offered an SEC co-defensive coordinator role, assistant head coach, co-defense coordinator, which would have been a really good job, a guy I really respect. And then there was some guys started reaching out to me about some head jobs. And this was a hard decision to make. Really, I was in such bad shape mentally and emotionally, and felt like I owed it to these players. Because I'll say immediately people started posting things and working, but there was never a thought that the program we brought back early on. It was not like, hey, let's go see if we can find some money. Let's go see if we can raise some. So, I think people, as they look back, go, I wonder if that was a possibility. And he stayed because he thought there was hope. There was no hope. There was no hope. This was a big deal to shut it down. It never happened in FBS football. So this was like, it was a death in all those senses of the word.
Okay. So your representation, because I know this because I was in the media then, and we heard the rumblings. I know Southern Mississippi, Memphis at the time, as you mentioned, some SEC schools were interested in your services. So when those opportunities were presented to you, you obviously decided to stay here.
Yeah.
What made you at that point in time think, okay, there's a legitimate possibility here that this thing could be, it might be a long haul,
yeah,
but there is a sliver of hope that we can bring this program back?
Yeah, and I think you go back and how time, you go, okay, what week was that when that was happening? So first we're really, and this was Christmas, you're close to Christmas. I remember my daughter Katie was moving, she was on academic scholarship at the University of Alabama. So she's a student there, and I'm actually going over there to her apartment with her. She moves back in for the second semester. And Kevin Skarbinski, there's these heroes of the return, Justin Kraft and Don Heyer and Charlie Nallen, these guys that were really behind the scenes fighting. Social media was really starting to, social media was nothing, but people were starting to get truth out there. Kevin Skarbinski was writing columns. And there was a column came out about the story about when I had the practice field, which we've talked about. I had money from Jimmy Lee for a practice field that really helped create some of this mess. I don't know all the facts of that, but a column came out, and when this column came out shortly thereafter, the powers that be decided, okay, we need to go back and see, because the story was it was all about money. Let's go back and see if it was really about money. Let's do a deep dive. And so, of course, our question was, who's these people that's going to do this fact-finding, this group?
Who's going to be auditing this situation?
Who's going to audit it? Are these real people? You just shut the program down. And it's going to turn out that they're actually people that really did do the right deep dive. They did ask the right questions, and they came back with the answers that said, no, we weren't in the red. We were in the black. Not by a lot. And, it wasn't like we were spending a ton of money. But that was early. But there was enough folks and enough people that would said, if you will stay. Now, I had to make a decision separate from that on where I was mentally. It was just so bad. I was in such a bad spot. And I was taking a gamble, really, that, okay, am I going to getting out of it for a year when I'm kind of hot? We'd turned this thing around. Should I wait? And I made the decision, especially with a lot of people saying, if we have any chance, you've got to be part of it. And so that kind of created that as the weeks went on and people were fighting, okay, I'll at least stay to give you some hope. But I really didn't have any.
Okay. All right. So Skarbinski writes the article. Obviously, doing the deep dive, they see that the program maybe was not in as worse shape as it was originally thought of in regards to, being so deep in the hole that they just had to shut the whole thing down. The community folks that you just brought up, take us there in regards to your memory of the first or couple conversations you had with people that said, hey, Coach, I think that we could get these business leaders in town together, and I think there's a potential here that we could present something to the university to maybe get this program back.
I tell you, there's so many things that happened from, let's just go January to May. There was a daily, I feel like it's the Donald Trump White House, where somebody's putting out social media posts about, let me tell you what really happened. Let me tell you that this happened. Let me tell you what's going on behind the scenes. But there was that small group of the nucleus of UAB, and then all these fans. But there was a lot of stories being written. What the heck's going on here? This isn't right. A lot of national press because of that YouTube YouTube video that got out of my players, and so this was really an example of social media and the UAB alumni and fans getting behind the program and fighting. So I've been asked to stay. I've helped all the players, and I'd like, look, we don't even have any players there.
Okay, so let me back up. Who asked you to stay?
Multiple people, the Jimmy Fillers, the Justin Crafts of the world, that if you would stay, and I'm like, stay for what? I mean,
right,
but okay. I finally get to that point. I'm willing to look at it and stay. The fighting is going on. They had a Iron City had a kind of a farewell. Somewhere in there, I might have said, keep giving them hell. That might have came up, So that probably helped instigate the fight.
Okay.
And so what's amazing through that time is somewhere, I remember the March time frame of Justin Kraft calling me, the former player, big supporter, really fighting his butt off, saying, okay, I think I've got some guys who are willing to look at this, and that's Tommy Brigham, who was a friend of mine, Jimmy Lee, who we've talked about, Hatton Smith, I didn't know, Kraft O'Neal, I really didn't know, Miller Gorey, gosh, I sure don't want to leave somebody out there. Of course, Justin, they were willing to go in there and look at this if I would stay. So now we got some guys who really are not UAB guys. Justin Kraft's the only UAB
but they're really
guy.
good businessmen, and they understand a spreadsheet and how to make it work.
And they saw UAB, and I tell them, UAB is the number one job employer in the state of Alabama. Attendance was already starting to go down, and they end up losing 1,000 students going into the next fall, as the spring starts coming. So now attendance is going down. There were marches going on, Tim Alexander and these guys were having march with the student. That was not stopping. That was like a daily occurrence of things being chanted at basketball games. And, and I'm back in Piedmont, Alabama, because I'd kept my house. Jacob was finishing up at Piedmont. But this is going on. This social media, this fight is going on. And Justin Kraft says, hey, will you stay, if we can get these guys? So Tommy Brigham calls me now. It's May. We will get involved. We may, and I didn't even know they were using their own money to backstop this thing. We will get involved with this supposed deficit if you stay. And that's when it, and I always laughed. I said, all right, guys, if I stay and we get involved and we somehow go bring it back, you're stuck. You are involved. And we always laughed as we told that story. But, yeah, that happens. And Ray Watts is the one that really made this decision. He had, I think, of course, we get the facts back. We get this independent commission comes in there and gives us the news. It really, this was in the black. It is sustainable. He has to make the decision, and you remember the announcement. They make the announcement. I'm not even at the announcement that the program's back.
Did you know that the announcement was coming?
I get a call the night before that, hey, I think this thing's coming back. I didn't believe it. I'd seen my program get shut down.
All the business leaders, basically, they were able to, not only that the previous audit that had taken place, and once those influential business leaders of our community decided to step up and get involved, take a look at the numbers, and then obviously present the case back to Ray Watts, then I suppose Ray Watts would then have to take it to the Board of Trustees.
Correct.
And then the Board of Trustees would have to bless it before
right.
Ray Watts would ultimately have that infamous press conference saying that UAB football is back.
Well, if you remember, I believe the trustees put it on Ray Watts and said, okay, if you decide you want your program back as the president, so now
it's on his watch.
It's on his watch.
Yeah.
And he was the one that shut it down. So now the facts come out, and I think he had made a public statement. Well, if the facts show that it's viable, and so my point to these guys were, look what we came into. It was not what it should be. The money was not right. For me to do this, we're going to involve. We're going to go raise money. And, I go back to the 2014. You talk about speaking something into existence. And not to pat myself on the back, I always say it's the Lord. But I remember January, I just gotten the job, and somebody interviews me outside. And I say, outside the terrible dentist office, as we call it. And I said, hey, we're going to build a new facility. We're going to redo this. We're going to build a new stadium. Oh, and by the way, we're going to be great in sports medicine, which was not, really our forte. But that was the vision.
Sure. Well, one thing is for sure, when you talk about great vision, the folks at Smart Bank, those guys know what they're doing when it comes to baking.
They really do. In fact, I was telling somebody the story of my becoming part of the board, but even before that, I found my banker, who I had used before, see him on an airplane flight. Where are you at? I'm going where you are. You left, I need you, and he'd gone to Smart Bank.
Right.
And, so I kind of followed my banker, and that just, I was telling a guy about this yesterday. In fact, I was at a dentist's office, and I was telling my dentist about it. I said, look, these guys, I'm looking for a bank just like that, of people that care, they know who I am, and that's who our guys are at Smart Bank.
That's Smart Bank, a great sponsor here of the Bill Clark Show, presented by Buffalo Rock Dr. Pepper. All right, so Ray Watts, the president of UAB, he makes the announcement that the football program's coming back. You were not there in attendance, so take us, what was the next step after it's officially made public that the university is willing to bring the football program back?
Well, immediately I'm calling coaches. And now imagine, you're telling people who have just been fired, oh, we're okay.
Many of them's already relocated.
And I
kids
can
out
name one of my guys, one of my strength coach at the time, didn't believe it. Now, you talking about heartbroken, played there, played for me, Zach Woodfin. It's like, Coach, I just can't trust him. I've got a job, and I understood. And, of course, it helped some of these guys didn't have a job.
Sure.
But can we bring this back? Are we going to do this? And that was my whole thing. I'm not trusting. And we have 0 players. So we don't even know what the NCAAs want. Now, the good news, and I'll say Brent Manowski was our commissioner. If you'll go back and look at this guy, great commissioner. We, 17 straight years.
Former commissioner of the Conference
Correct,
USA.
excuse me. Yeah, 17 straight years or whatever we are now, maybe 18, 19, whatever we are now, the number one college football watching city in America. You know that, and that's your business.
Yep.
And mine now. So they wanted us back. They needed us back. We were great for media. We were great. So they were, and I still remember I was speaking in Dallas at a clinic, and I go by Conference USA. I'm looking for a job. I'm like, hey, I'm not going to take anything this year, but next year, just be ready. Coach, we think you could come back. I said, what are you talking about? So I'm starting to get the calls from Brett Banowski, who's having calls with these guys behind the scenes. There's a shot. There's a maybe. It's moving. So they were going to help us get back in the league. Now, I promise you, a lot of the teams in the league didn't like it. What can we do to go get a full roster? So Oliver Luck, if you know Andrew Luck,
Yep.
Oliver Luck, we know that name. He had really just gotten in with the NCAA, thank God, as the number 2 guy. So now we got a football guy who knew this story. Conference USA wants us back. They need us back. I've got a handful of players that had been injured and stayed on campus, 5, 6, 7, whatever that was. So I had those guys. Are y'all interested? And now, but here's what's crazy. I start getting these calls from my players that are at Arkansas State or Western Kentucky or Georgia State. Coach, we want to come back.
Some good group of 5 schools.
Yes, and these guys were starters for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it was such a bond for those guys. It was a family. I mean, and so these guys are like, we're coming back. I'm like, you understand, this is 15. There's no way we're going to play until, and I'm starting to figure out we're not going to play. I'm really thinking it should be longer, and they're telling me we're going to play in 17. Are you going to sit out the 15, 16 season?
Wow.
To get ready and leave what you got? So I'm having to talk kids out of wanting to come back. Now, the guys that were there, and some of them said, Coach, I'm coming back no matter what. So that process is starting, but we're negotiating with Luck on what it's going to look like. And, of course, there's people there working. Now people are immediately worried, what benefits are we going to get? I remember Marshall was really worried about what's going to happen. I'm like, guys, we don't have a program.
Wait a second. So Marshall was more worried about what it was going to mean to them once UAB got back into the league?
That I was going to get some kind of unfair recruiting advantages. I'm like, wait a second, we don't have players. and the players I'm going to get on a high school level, and can you imagine now, I've got high school guys who've lived this in Birmingham, and Coach, come on. Yeah, you want us to come over and you just had your program shut down. Come on. Are you kidding me? Now, I did have
kind of a recruiting disadvantage.
I had to have 6 months to think, okay. And I just kept going back to the SMU because there's really no – I had started we had started the program at South, not I, but we had started the program at South from nothing. And I still remember trying to compete against Troy and some of those places and going, you don't have a program. This is established. But here's the difference. They had willingly shut your own program down. So I was really dead in the water with most high school guys. So that's when the junior college idea came on. And the one thing they said we'll do for you, we will not let their clock move because there's a window. Now, of course, who knows what the window is now?
Sure.
10 years or maybe, I'm kidding. But there was a 5-year window. When that clock starts ticking, it ends at that 5-year mark no matter what, unless you've had some medical, we'll stop your clock in this time. That's the one thing they gave us, which was a big deal.
Sure.
So I'm thinking junior college players, especially junior college guys who are coming off an injury.
Smart.
Now, I had to start thinking about facilities. We had to go raise money. How am we going to raise money when we hadn't been able to raise money to a place that's, so this is where the miracles really start occurring. How are we going to get anybody to come into a program that's shut down with the worst facilities in America? And they're coming from all over the country. How's this going to work?
We are continuing our conversation about some tough times, but some better times in regards to the shutdown of the UAB football program, as Bill Clark was the head coach when it shut down. And we're discussing now the program that is on the verge of coming back. The announcement had taken place. You're starting to look at a roster. And speaking about a roster, Donahue Chevrolet, they've got an awesome roster of vehicles. And Donahue Chevrolet, of course, your Tahoe that you drive in each and every week when you come to do the show, it's very impressive.
Yeah, and my daughter ended up buying the same Tahoe. The thing I love about Donahue, I know these guys so well because they did our coaches' cars, and Chris Donahue and those guys. Chris played baseball at UAB and just loves this community. And obviously you got a dealership in Fort Payne. We've got one here in Pelham. You got Donahue Chevrolet that's terrific. You got all the great Chevy deals, but you've also got just Donahue, who is so good to deal with. And, that's what's cool about our sponsors, that we have the first time and guys that are continuing with us. You got great people to deal with. They're fair. They got a great selection. So you got all the Chevrolets, and then they carry all kind of other brands as well.
So quickly, because we're running short of time on this episode, and we're going to continue this conversation in next week as we'll talk about the program officially coming back and the facility upgrades and the brand new stadium. But from the coaches that you talk to, just like you said, the players having that loyalty to you, I know that was also something that probably made you feel really good, as not only as a coach, but as a person, as a friend, because many of those guys decided to come back and be back on your staff.
Yeah, they really did. It was really, that's why I say it's such a miraculous story that these guys believed in me and they trusted me. And that's why I was so intent that it had to be right. We had to do this thing right. They had to have some guarantees that this thing was not going away again, and we were going to do it the right way, which probably, as I always said, and I've said this so many times in so many interviews, the worst thing that could happen turns out to be the best, because we get a chance to remake it the way we want to remake it and do it right and change facilities and go raise money and all that, which we'll tell our story next week.
Absolutely. Global Canine Protection Group, a brand new sponsor here on the Bill Clark Show. And for folks that do not know their story, it's pretty amazing as well.
Yeah, it really is a great story. So, this is a company run by veterans that are training dogs. And, we all see the German Shepherds and those dogs that they have that are out sniffing out bombs and guns and those things to keep us safe. And they're NFL teams and airlines across the country. They're really the only ones that are doing what they're doing. They're run by veterans, which I love that story. And then they have these soft-eared dogs that are sitting there that, don't scare anybody. And you go into these stadiums and they can smell a bomb, they can smell guns. So they're doing great work, keeping us safe around the country, and they're doing it with veterans. So proud to have these guys as a sponsor.
It's an Alabama company, too.
It's an Alabama company. They're based out of Auburn, Alabama.
That is unbelievable. So we appreciate all of our sponsors here on the Bill Clark Show. Of course, Buffalo Rock, Dr. Pepper, Donahue Chevrolet, Smart Bank, and Global Canine Protection Group. Well, this has been a very quick program, Coach, as we went down memory lane. Next week on the show, we will continue this conversation. We'll talk about that roster management that Coach was just talking about, getting his coaching staff in line, and the facilities, which was also big for recruiting purposes, building yourself a football-only facility.
Yep.
And, of course, laying the groundwork for a brand-new stadium in downtown Birmingham. So we'll continue that conversation next week. Should be a lot of fun as we talk about a resurrection in regards to the UAB football program. For Molly Robinson, I'm Pat Smith. For Coach Bill Clark, hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll catch you next week on the Bill Clark Show, presented by Buffalo Rock and Dr. Pepper.
This has been the Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper.